continuation with the series on economic sociology, in today's lecture we are going to discuss on the process of McDonaldization of society. This concept of McDonaldization was given by George Richer in his work when he is trying to understand the transformation of society. In the late 20th century, we have started understanding the growth of food chain, which is built on the four principles of efficiency, calculability, predictability and control. Based on these four principles, McDonaldization has kind of spread to every segment of society and became a kind of an icon or a global icon, where we see that this represented not only in every part of the world, but also it was adopted by many business, and many of the businesses adopted the nickname beginning with Mac. And we see a large number of examples where McDonald is a global icon. The example include Mac Dentist, Mac Doctor, meaning drive-in clinics designed to deal quickly and efficiently with minor dental and medical problems. We also have Mac Child Care Center, meaning child care centers such as Kinder Care, Mac Stable, designating the nationwide racehorse training operation of Wine Lucas, and Mac Paper, describing newspaper of US Today. So we see that McDonaldization is a global icon and has spread across the globe. Now when we try to understand McDonaldization, we have seen in the first part of the lecture that Ritzer adopted Weber's theory of rationality to explain this transformation. And therefore, McDonaldization is conceived as a form of rationality. In the history of human civilization, there are very different types of rationality. McDonaldization is a new paradigm. It presupposes all-round development of purposeful rational activities, forms control and predictable behavioral act. At the same time, all forms of McDonaldization tend to reduce people to the impersonal factor of social activity, and this contributes to the dehumanization of the human personality and the release of distractive, irrational desire and actions in it. So now we are going to understand both the advantage of rationality, and later we will see the downside, that is how rationality in itself leads to irrational activities and behavior. So first let us look into the advantages of McDonaldization. The process of McDonaldization also moved ahead dramatically, undoubtedly, because it has led to positive changes. Number one, a wider range of goods and services is available to much larger portion of the population than ever before, thanks to the technology which has kind of made us available. So whichever part of the country we are, we can have the same taste and order the same kind of food from a food chain restaurant. The second advantage is availability of goods and service depends far less than before on time or geographic location. People can do things such as obtain money at the grocery store or a bank balance in the middle of the night that were impossible before. So there is no restriction, that we are rather living in a timeless and spaceless world. The third advantage is people are able to get what they want or need almost instantly and get it far from conveniently. Now we look into a lot of marketing apps which are available and which are kind of making the claim that they can deliver grocery to your any essential need that is required within 5 minutes to 10 minutes. So everything is now instantly available. Fourth, goods and services are of far more uniform quality. At least some people even get better quality goods and service than before McDonaldization. Fifth, far more economic alternatives to higher priced customized goods and services are widely available. Therefore, people can afford things they could not previously afford. So people have been able to kind of do research on the market and the product that are available, and many a time we see that they are kind of alternatives to expensive items which people can't afford, but you can get the same at a lower price. So, rather now your pocket will not define what product you consume, because the same product is available through a lesser price. The sixth advantage is that fast, efficient goods and services are available to a population that is working longer hours and has fewer hours to spare. Now, if they were to offer advantage in terms of the time that you can deliver your food instantly or any other item, that means someone is working 24/7. So, your working hours have increased in order to ensure that the consumers are able to consume instantly. Now, the disadvantage is that this means that the worker's life is becoming routinized and alienated. They do not have much time to spare for leisure or for any kind of recreation. The seventh advantage is, in a rapidly changing, unfamiliar and seemingly hostile world, the comparatively stable, familiar and safe environment of McDonaldization offers comfort. So, you are familiar with the setup, you are familiar with the taste, you are familiar with the crowd that would be around. So, that gives you a peace of kind of mind. And also where people would want to kind of eat food with, say, same kind of people or in a hygienic neat condition, the McDonaldized system is a system that gives you comfort. Eighth, because of quantification, consumers can more easily compare competing products. So, certain products, for example, diet programs, are safer in a carefully regulated and controlled system. So, we know one of the fourth principle of McDonaldization was control. So, you cannot kind of sell any product without undergoing the review and the test. So, once it's on the platform for the sale, the consumers are ensured that they would get a regulated and controlled product. The 10th advantage is people are more likely to be treated similarly no matter what their race, gender or social class. So, the consumer is kind of a homogenized category. For the seller of any kind of product, they are most interested in ensuring that the product is sold. Whom the product is being sold is not their concern. So, it could be person from any race, from any gender, from any social class. So, you have that feasibility of consuming something which any kind of restriction on your identity. The 11th advantage is organizational and technological innovations are more quickly and easily diffused through networks of identical operators. The 12th advantage, the most popular product of one culture are more easily diffused to other. So, it's kind of, if any product is accepted by the consumer and it is selling, then it kind of spreads all over. It then doesn't stop through geographical location or time. It is being consumed across the population and at different parts of the globe. Now, we have looked into a number of advantages. However, despite having these advantages, Richter argues that the process is potentially detrimental and dehumanizing, arguing from a barbarian perspective that the rationality itself may cause irrationality. Efficiency, calculability, predictability and control, the four basic principles of McDonaldization, can often end up with illogical, counterintuitive and problematic results. So, he is also kind of making reference to the iron cage, where you are kind of trapped by being too rational in your behavior. So, basically irrationality of rationality means that the process has several disadvantages or it has certain demerits. So, it has kind of downside of it. Efficiency, predictability, calculability, and control through non-human technology can be thought as the basic component of a rational system. However, rational system inevitably spawn irrationalities. Other way of saying this is that rational system serve to deny human reason. Rational systems are often unreasonable. So, the worker in a McDonald's setup does not have any chance of a kind of bringing in a new method or kind of giving in more innovative idea, is doing the same routinized work, alienated from his labor, from his workspace, and therefore the human element is completely withdrawn. The downside of McDonaldization deals with the irrationality of rationality, which Ritzer outlined as the fifth dimension of McDonaldization. As Ritzer says, irrationality means that rational systems are unreasonable systems. This implies that they deny the basic humanity, the human reason of the people who work within or reserved by them. For example, McDonaldization has produced a wide array of adverse effects on the environment. One is a side effect of the need to grow uniform potatoes from which to create predictable French fry. The huge farms of the Pacific Northwest that now produce such potatoes rely on the extensive use of chemicals. In addition, the need to produce a perfect fry means that much of the potato is wasted, with the remains either fed to the cattle or used for fertilizers. The underground water supply in the area is not showing high level of nitrates, which may be traceable to the fertilizers and animal waste. Many other ecological problems are associated with McDonaldization of the fast food industry. The forest felled to produce paper wrapping, the damage caused by packaging materials, the enormous amount of food needed to produce feed cattle, and so on. The third unreasonable effect of the fast food restaurant are often dehumanizing settings in which to eat or work. Customers lining up for a burger or waiting in the drive-through line and workers preparing the food often feel as though they are part of an assembly line. Hardly amenable to eating, assembly lines have been shown to be inhuman settings in which to work. Hence, Ritzer points out three negative consequences of McDonaldization. These are irrationality, de-skilling, and consumer workers. Ritzer also questions the belief that fast food restaurant and other McDonaldized environments are causing to the environment, to the individualizing of the society. There is hardly any kind of an interaction between either between the consumer or between the workers, and therefore it is creating an illusionary system where people are kind of only focused in terms of the product that they are consuming. McDonaldized business are really not necessarily reasonable. They often lead to inefficiency, health and environment problem, and ultimately may make us less human. Ritzer has also focused on the great cost and enormous risk of McDonaldization. Ritzer contends that McDonaldization is a double-edged phenomena, enabling and constraining, and his book focuses on the constraints associated with McDonaldization, that it's its dark side. So, if we read his book, we will not kind of be focusing on what advantages it has, because it has certainly led to the transformation of society from say a traditional to a postmodern society. But the entire focus is on the aspect that it's a double-edged phenomena. That implies that it has certain advantages of becoming more efficiency, you can predict, you can have a better control, But the downside is far more problematic, and as sociologists, we need to focus more on the downside in terms of understanding the negative consequences of rationality, negative outfall of being too much dependent on internet and technology. So, what we basically want to understand, that has McDonaldized covered every aspect of the society, or there are certain segments which are still not McDonaldized. So, what isn't McDonaldized? So, is McDonaldization the equivalent of modernity? Is everything contemporary McDonaldized? Although much of the world has been McDonaldized, at least three aspects of contemporary society have largely escaped the process. Number one, those aspects traceable to an earlier pre-modern age. A good example is a mom and pop grocery store. Number two, new businesses that sprung up on expanded and at least as a reaction against McDonaldization. For instance, people fed up with McDonaldized motel rooms in Holiday Inns or Motel 6s can instead stay in a bed and breakfast, which offers a room in a private home with personalized attention and a homemade breakfast from the proprietor. The third area which hasn't been McDonaldized are those aspects suggesting a move towards a new postmodern age. For example, in a postmodern society, modern high-rise housing projects would make way for a smaller, more livable communities. Rather, if we see that in large number of areas, we individual consumers are now not waiting for efficiency and calculability. They are moving back to the traditional ways of living and consuming, which gives them more satisfaction, which gives them more content, and also making them able to be a part of the collective. So, we have come through the concept of McDonaldization. We have understood the advantages and disadvantages. Let us go through some of the critiques that against McDonaldization. One of the critique was by Kellner, and he points out firstly that Rizzo manages to cover a diverse number of areas simply because his thesis is so broad as to conceptually grasp and interpret a wealth of data. Kellner argues that Rizzo's theory relies too heavily on Weber's work on rationalization. This generates a one-sided and limited optic that needs to be expanded by further critical perspectives. Rizzo's method of research are also quite limited and can be described simply as journalistic. He uses everyday observable illustration which are easy to relate and discuss. So, he is kind of giving us a kind of top approach, where you see that the people are going to these McDonaldized setup, consuming and coming back. But Rizzo does not look into the feedback, or many a time where food served would have kind of some problem where customer would be dissatisfied with the taste or would be dissatisfied with the way in which the communication took place. So, it is kind of one-sided view of the system. His view is heavily reliant on media articles to exemplify his argument. Now, if we look into the media articles or media review, most of the time the media reviews are actually not given by the consumer themselves. It is again a paid service where the service provider spends amount to get the media review. So, if your research is based on the media review rather than the actual consumer, then it could be a bit biased. Kellner argues that his theory is kind of absent in terms of considering the subjective aspect of McDonaldization and the role of human agent. So, when he is trying to understand the impact or the influence of the model which built on Fordism rationality, the research, as a research, the focus should be in terms of understanding the human element of it, whereas much of the discussion of Ritzer is moving away from the human perspective. Therefore, Ritzer is heavily kind of reliant on the descriptive aspect of the process. How do we as individual view McDonaldization process, and how does it serve our interest? This should be more important, that there is a huge big size of consumer of these services. So, the researchers should focus more in terms of understanding the individual experience of being a consumer of a McDonaldized service compared to a non-McDonaldized service. Are those experiences the same? So, it should be more a qualitative description of consumption rather than a kind of a descriptive explanation. There seems to be too much focus on production, which a disregard for the diverse experience and practices of consumption. So, basically it is also very close to Marxian understanding of skilling and de-skilling, where in a capitalist mode of production the workers were doing routinized work. It led to de-skilling because they are controlled in terms of what activities they are doing. So, Ritzer is taking a lot from Marx's understanding of modes of production, and also depending too much on the ways in which Weber explained rationality. Kellner suggests that cultural studies be included in the McDonaldization thesis. The McDonald experience today, for example, has arguably entered the postmodern realm, where McDonald advertising has come to represent a quasi-mythical, hyper-real world of American family, fun and good time. And also if we look into the consumption or the consumers of McDonald, at one point it has been given that it does not affect the class. But if we look in a setup like India, where there is a larger segments of the economically poorer section, do we see someone from say poor class being a consumer of the McDonald's? So, it is basically catering to a particular class who has the economic means to afford them. It is a kind of also in terms of a burger which could you get in a local market compared to the cost, it is kind of more expensive. So, it does not cross across class, it is basically catering to the middle or the upper middle consumers who has a particular lifestyle, who kind of does not want to spend too much time on say for instance on cooking, and would want to have something at instantly. So, it becomes a quasi mythical, and it is kind of a hyper real world for a certain section of the population. Kellner proposes that a multi-perspective approach would be more valuable, and the incorporation of the work of theories in such as Baudrillard would be useful. Another critique of McDonaldization is O'Neill, published in 1999, and he questions whether McDonaldization is sufficient theory to explain changes to our experience of consumption in recent time. He describes Richard's book as theory burger, only suitable for the lay population. Ritzer has claimed that fast food restaurant has standardized everything related to production and consumption of good, from the shape and size of fries to the scripting of human interaction. This revolutionary system is indicative of changes in other areas of social life today and marks the beginning of future changes to come. By utilizing Weber's classical work on rationalization and the iron cage of bureaucracy, Ritzer applies and extended to present-day experience of production and consumption. McDonaldization has certainly standardized consumer experience, but with this over pessimistic analysis, Ritzer fails to offer any insight into the deeper social and cultural reason and ramification of this process. For reference, it's important to read the original work of Ritzer, The McDonaldization of American Sociology, a meta-sociological analysis in Ritzer edited McDonaldization Theories. With this, I come to an end of this lecture. Thank you.